Today we have Vivek Vimal speaking about his process for finding inspiration. Vivek is a postdoc at the Ashton Graybiel Spatial Laboratory at Brandeis. He has an interesting backstory, which you are about to hear about. He is much more of an academic than he is a business person, but he exemplifies the entrepreneurial spirit. And he's the type of person with crazy ideas and actually makes them happen. So Vivek, take it away.
Cool. Well, thanks so much. And sorry that my video for some reason is not working. Hi, everybody. My name is Vivekand. And today I'll talk about finding inspiration. And to do that, I'm going to talk about 7+1 practical steps on how I try to find inspiration. And this will be like a 34-minute journey. And just as Hannah said, I'm not actually classified as an entrepreneur. So at first I was a little bit worried. I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to give like a lecture in an entrepreneurial lecture series? But then Hannah dropped some nice wisdom and she said, look, a lot of things that you do are entrepreneurial in spirit. And so as a result, you can sort of share some of these things. And I should say, I did get a Spark grant a few years ago, and then I am on a current Spark grant. And so I'll talk about those. After that 34 minutes or so, we'll do like a guided question and answer that Hannah is going to use to maybe refocus what I said to a more entrepreneurial lens, or we may even do like a breakout session and do some cool brainstorming. Okay, so as an introduction into myself, I am a postdoctoral fellow in the Ashton Graybiel Spatial Orientation Lab, and I'm funded by the Translational Research Institute for Spatial. And they are in a cooperative agreement with NASA. And so as a result, my research is designed to answer questions that NASA has outlined in its risks and gaps. I've also been at Brandeis for quite a bit of time because I did my PhD in neuroscience from Brandeis. And today I'll be talking about my long and meandering journey, which began submerged and perhaps drowning in a cesspool of paralyzed inaction. And that's going to be the first part of my presentation. And then it's going to build up to the second part, which is how I now feel inspired to do science and to a certain extent, entrepreneurship. So back in the old days, back in third grade, this is just my report card, all those circles, represent Fs. So it was a hard time for me to inspire work or good grades, even though I tried my best. This is a standardized test, and that red line is the 50th percentile mark, and I am performing below that on almost everything.
Yay.
What's that? Oh yeah. And then also physically, in a physical fitness exam, I was performing well below average. So by the time I was graduating high school, I had this deep ebbing desire to create something of beauty, but I did not know how to be able to grasp that. And so essentially the story is sort of how do I go from that? And after Lexington High School, I went to BU and I studied physics and minored in computer science and math. And I primarily did that because I wanted to see into the very architecture of this universe. But at BU, it was a difficult time, and the raging cycles of self-hatred and depression that began in high school began to almost mushroom and magnify when I was at BU. And a part of this, you can see this in my grades. Junior year, I got a C, I got a D, I withdrew from a course, and everything that I sort of valued was shattering right in front of my eyes. And so I felt deeply within the inner chambers of my soul like a failure, as if I was worthless, and self-hatred and self-disgust consumed everything that I had. At this stage in my life, there was no way that I could create new ideas or do anything related to entrepreneurship just because I was mired in this mental state. And sort of this picture encapsulates what those feelings are, because at BU, I created something called the symbolic nasty pose, which is what you see to the left. And this was taken at a dumpster near BU. And that was the first time I ever did it. And since then, I've been doing it all the time. And that big distended stomach, what that represents is potential energy. It represents fat. And as a result, it represents dreams. And I look at my hands, which represent kinetic energy, which represent motion, which represent the ability to realize my dreams, and yet they remain stagnant. And so I ask myself, Why am I so nasty? Okay, so it initially started out as a manifestation of self-hatred and stagnant inspiration. And eventually it turned into a way to motivate myself. So it's the same pose, but it has different meanings. So the picture at the right was taken right after I had gotten my PhD and I finished the defense. So at BU, I went to officer candidate school for the Marine Corps, and I decided to do that because, again, I wanted inspiration. And I was hoping that intense discipline would be able to force me into a situation where I could grasp for my dreams. But it turned out that it helped. It got me to the next step, but it definitely did not get me all the way where I wanted to go. That still took 10 more years of life and experience and maybe a little bit of wisdom. But I eventually graduated from OCS, and I was offered to become a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. I decided not to take that commission, and one reason why was I sat down with my company commander, and he was like, "Look, you're not a fundamental killer, and so you may want to think about other ways that you can help the country." And so I thought about that, and so I became a high school teacher right at Waltham High School, and I taught there for 6 years of my life. Now, by the second year of my teaching, that is when the first whiff of inspiration began to enter into my being and into my destiny. And even then, it's not the first step, it's just the first whiff. And this is step 0. And what I learned is that for me to feel inspired for entrepreneurship or for science, I had to first create an environment of balance where I had proper diet, proper exercise, good sleep cycles, and yes, in fact, good poop cycles, because a healthy intestines often means a healthy and happy mind as well. What I also realized was that in order to be an effective teacher, I had to open the chambers of my heart and really love myself so that I could love my students. And this was probably one of the most fundamental changes that I needed to inspire anything in myself, which was to change my internal negative monologue, which had fangs filled with venom, which destroyed everything that I tried to do, into a positive one that was there for me through my failures, through my difficulties, and it was a support system. So this was really the establishing foundation upon which everything was built. At Waltham High School, as a high school teacher, I learned my first marketable skills, how to talk to people, how to present, how to teach. And because of Waltham High School and being a teacher, I started getting these opportunities. And I didn't know what I'd do with those opportunities, but I was collecting them nevertheless. So I got these courses I took at Brandeis as a high school teacher for free. And I started doing pretty good in them. And I took computational neuroscience, which paved the path to my PhD in neuroscience. After that, I got the opportunity to work in the summertime as a high school teacher, researching in a lab at the Rockefeller University. And I used what I learned from computational neuroscience to look at the firing patterns that are emerging from the brain of the rat. At the same time, the picture on the right is showing that I got Bell's palsy, and that is a story for another day, but it was a crazy adventure nevertheless. So what I'm coming at now is the way that I started to go from a really bad resume and a bad GPA to the point where I could be a PhD student at Brandeis. It was taking these small incremental steps, piece by piece, until I was able to get to a new location where really the foundation of my entrepreneurship and science all began to take root. And so this is my first actual step, practical step. That small incremental steps is what built my destiny and unfroze my paralysis. And I often love to use the word epic, but really the magic is in small incremental steps. And so my advice to my younger self is to gather as many of these incremental opportunities as possible. You may not exactly know what they'll be useful for, but one day when you're a bit older, you'll be able to step back and begin to assemble a storyline that creates a structure in your destiny. And that's essentially how you may be able to reach entrepreneurship if you feel frozen at the current time. Hand in hand, the second step that was absolutely essential was getting small incremental victories that redesigned my reward system. Because at least I felt that the educational system, along with almost everything else, hacked my reward system. And what I mean by that is it forced me to think of everything in terms of grades and deadlines. I needed validation from an institution, and only then would my subconscious allow me to invest time to do something. So after I got out of BU, I brainstormed this cool idea of mapping out complex magnetic fields, but I couldn't even take one step in it because it was just my project and my subconscious just completely crushed it. And I was just, I called it laziness, but what it really was that my subconscious didn't trust that my invested time would yield something. So what really changed me fundamentally were small series of small victories that convinced me that yes, in fact, you can wait, delay gratification for a few months, and you can actually create something of beauty. So I'll give you like a quick example. And one way actually to get these incremental victories is by exploiting other systems that hack your reward system, like Facebook or Instagram, YouTube, blogs, open mics, or even talks like this. And honestly, I mean, this is the same steps for entrepreneurship if you're trying to do content development. And that's, in retrospect, essentially what I did. So my first step was I just started posting things on Facebook. And I was just taking pictures around my backyard, and I'm a beekeeper, so I start taking pictures of my bees. In this particular picture, it's wintertime, the bees are all inside the hive, they flap their wings to keep the hive temperature up, but they don't poop in the hive because they're wicked clean. So they, on a warm winter day, they wait for it. They go out and they do a poop loop, and they fly out, they poop, and they come back into the hive. That's what this picture is. So I don't get a lot of likes, but the few that I do, they're so delicious. So that then leads to, and this, by the way, just took 1 hour to do, but then that leads to something that required more time investment. So then I start making these YouTube videos, which require a lot more time. It takes me a week per YouTube video, and I do a lot of literature search. I talk about larger ideas like superorganisms. And again, I don't get a lot of views, but the fact that I get a few is enough delicious candy, mental candy, to provide me and the next step to move in. And so then I was asked to go to MIT, and again, this is actually entrepreneurial because they asked me and a few 2 or 3 other people to essentially lead a networking event for an entrepreneurial event. And there were professors there were doctors there were CEOs, people from businesses, so it's like a pretty big thing. And so we decided to do this bee-oriented. And so you can see my bee frame is there. We created this little card that required people from different departments and industries to sort of intermingle with each other. And we used keywords like cross-pollination. And this took 1 month. And again, I never would have reached this if I wasn't taking those small incremental reward steps to get there. And I also got a bee drink there, which was kind of interesting. And unrelated, I made some mead too. But I finished this like little storyline with now what I'm working on is taking inspiration from my bees and how they do spatial orientation, and taking that and thinking about how can we use their knowledge to enhance human spatial orientation, which could again be turned into a business if I get successful results. So you can kind of see how this thing, which will take several months, initially came from something that just took 10 minutes. Okay, step 3, which is like absolutely critical for inspiration, and I think for entrepreneurship for sure as well, is creating networks and community that incubate ideas, that allow you to experiment and iterate those ideas. And so I should say that creating networks and community is very difficult. I mean, especially if you're like me, you don't have money or fame, it's very difficult to get people together. A lot of people don't answer my emails. They're definitely in the beginning. No one would come to my event. And you have to be okay if no one comes, because then you say, even if no one's here, I'm still going to go through this. I'm still going to develop content. And as you begin to create that content in your own fertile universe, eventually a few resonant creatives will hone in onto you and come to you, and then you can collaborate and create stuff. And this is what they call, I guess, essentially networking. And so that's a key word that they use in entrepreneurship from my very limited comprehension of entrepreneurship. So my first step, because I wanted to inspire multidisciplinary thoughts, was to create a multidisciplinary community. So I created Disortium, the Brandeis Multidisciplinary Consortium, and I brought people from all sorts of different departments at Brandeis, anthropology, all the way to musicology. And we got together and we just brainstormed really interesting ideas. We got a small grant. Many of those things, if we were business-minded, could have definitely been turned into small businesses. And eventually, actually, and I'll talk about this later, this led to a successful research paper, which I'll be publishing in just 2 or 3 days. So it was something that really inspired multidisciplinary thought. The next sort of community that I created was to inspire educational outreach because I'm a former high school teacher and a part of my soul lives within the community. And I believe it's fundamentally all of our responsibility to do devotion. So I gathered a bunch of people together, all volunteers. I created this program, the Waltham High School Brandeis Summer Research Program. And basically I brought like 8 students, Waltham High kids, every summer for about 6 weeks. I paired them individually with a postdoc or a grad student, and they took 2 informal courses as well, and they did inquiry-based STEM research projects. So it was really pretty epic. And one of those years, I got Spark funding, which was really cool. And it also, this led to an I-Corps project, which I'll talk about later. Other things that I do, like I like to, inspire discussions on American identity. So, I brought together people to do that. And this is sort of on like the Festival of Lights and how different backgrounds celebrate that differently and how we can innovate something inherently new and therefore American. And then below is some woodworking stuff that I do. More specific to Brandeis, in order to explore the next era of my research, which is human augmentation, I created this group with Jacob, who's an undergrad, and he's a really cool guy. And so we get together and then we talk about human augmentation. Okay, so far, just as a quick review, the way that I inspire myself for academic pursuits or for entrepreneurship is to create a stable and balanced environment, to plant the seed of destiny through small incremental steps of opportunity, to then motivate its growth through small incremental pieces of inspiration, and then nurture that through a community. But now the question is, how do I go from there to getting to the point where I can reach for my dreams that are much more epic and larger in scope? And so the way I do this, and in many ways, this may be very specific to me, but there are things that can be generalized from this. Every 6 years, what I do is I create ceremonies. And these ceremonies give birth to the next era of my life. They inspire me to think about my dreams, my failures, and what they really demand is that the next 6 years of my life have to be fundamentally and intrinsically different than the last 6 years of my life. And often this means making a huge transition. So it inspires me to set large goals. I invite a lot of different people, and I go through this rebirth process where I shave off all of my hair. So I'm physically reminded of the promise that I've made for myself. And again, maybe the entrepreneurial link over here is that businesses too go through different stages of growth. And maybe you can hold a ceremony or an event to sort of remind yourself that now my business is going to a different stage. So I'll give you 2 examples of how I do this. The first example is from July 2009. It was my rebirth ceremony. I wanted to fundamentally change the rhythm of my existence. And for the past 5 to 6 years, I was teaching at Waltham High. I got tenure. It was the first time in my life that I felt really comfortable and really like capable. And then all of a sudden, I was like, things need to change because a long time ago, I had made a promise to myself that I would try to go out in the world, disrupt my comfort, and try to actively do something to benefit society. So I made the decision, because of my ceremony, to leave Waltham High School, leave my job, go to India, and work there as a consultant for an NGO. And I chose India because I wanted like a deeper understanding of my heritage. Okay, so then here's my hair, and then I have a ceremony, I bring people, I shave it all off, and then I go to India and I make documentaries, which I'd never done before, and I write grants on, basically the first project was on climate change and subsistence farmers. The second project was on tribal women and entrepreneurship. And the third project was on the condition of children in a city. The second example of a rebirth ceremony was more recently, July 2017, when I finished my PhD. And one of the big things I wanted to do was devote more time to growing a community. And I did that by, so I went through the shaving process, and then I got people together by having a coronation ceremony for my pet rat. And her name, unfortunately, she passed away, but her name was Her Royal Majesty Queen Herpes I. And I had a whole marching parade. And then here she is coronated. She's a queen now, and she's knighting a rabbit. And then she's also knighting my PhD advisor, Paul Dizio, which is pretty crazy. But the second goal I wanted for this, this rebirth ceremony was something a bit more serious, which was that I was going from a very structured PhD program to complete free fall. Because now I'm not a PhD student anymore. I got my PhD. I have no structure. What am I going to do with my life? And again, the similarity to entrepreneurship may be that you go from a structured incubator where you have mentors to maybe now a self-standing business where maybe you don't have as many mentors or as much structure. So basically what I decided to do, and this is something that really, really helped me out, was I spent about a month or two sitting, introspectively thinking, and creating a document that was publicly sent out, that contained my dreams. And so I'm just gonna quickly show you like what that looks like. So it's called a rough plan for the rest of my life. And here, like, I go through and I detail all the things for research that I want to do, all of the things that I want to do to improve the world, my artistic stuff, things about myself. And you can see it's a pretty extensive document, and different people have commented on it. But this sort of focused thinking is really what allowed me to try to figure out like what my dreams are. And really, like, before doing it, I'd get these like moments in my life where I'd feel like feelings of panic. I was like, oh my God, I'm wasting my life. What's going on? But I didn't know how to address it. It was just, everything was a dense fog. And this added a little bit more definition. Still, I wrote down my dreams, but I had no idea of how to reach it. So the next thing that I did, and again, so I created a website, which is essentially, these are steps that you probably do for a business too. You create a vision statement, and then you create a website that sort of connects your vision statement to what you have right now. And so the website has been absolutely instrumental in what I do, because it allows me to focus and sort of deposit all the pillars of creativity that I have, and then create a storyline that connects those pillars together, leading eventually to new ideas in science and entrepreneurship. So I have a whole thing on research. I have my portfolio where there's all sorts of, creative stuff. I have teaching, different projects, and then my mythological universe. So again, just to give you like an idea, I do like different types of clothing art. So you've got, different stuff I'm doing. But if you look at the top, what I've done is I've broken it up into stages. So stage one is like really basic stuff that I can just do tomorrow, which is I can create artistic patches along these themes that I think are really interesting. And again, if I was creating a business to sell my clothing, and people have actually asked me to buy my clothing, so I guess I could, these were the steps that I would go through. I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna create my content, and then I'm gonna connect it to community and identity, which takes a lot more effort, and then I'll make it epic by doing much bigger things, like creating a book and video series, or hosting things at a international airport or whatever. I do the same thing for like woodcraft, and then for teaching, and I always could create like a teaching nonprofit if I want to. I do everything for free as a devotional practice, but you can see it's like a lot more involved, and these are all ideas that can turn into a business quite easily. And I've got the different stages, I've got like different goals, and I've got different phases of what the implementation would be, from the very local level all the way to like the national level of what kind of changes would I make to policy. So these are things that are like what have been guiding me. Okay, so now I'm going to finish off with one storyline. Okay, what really sort of inspires me and turns me on is really creating storylines that go across every layer of what I do. And I usually like things that are unexpected, where I can't even predict where it's going to end up. And at the end of it, I look back and I'm like, wow, this was pretty crazy. So I'm going to present to you a multi-layered storyline on how my research, my community, my educational outreach, and my mythological universe inspired entrepreneurship, how it ended up in the current Spark grant that I'm helping out with. Okay, it all starts with my research. I work on spatial disorientation, which is I just strap blindfolded humans into this machine here. They use a joystick to try to balance themselves. And I've got one condition where they get very disoriented. They have no idea where they are. And this has relevance to spaceflight, to astronauts, and also to military pilots, and also to people that may have vestibular damage. Okay, so then I was like, okay, I want to make this idea multidisciplinary. How do I do that? So I created Disortium, and from there, I met Nikhil. And Nikhil was at the time a computer science grad student. We started talking with one another because of this networking community that I made. And he, after he got to know me, said, okay, fine, I'll spend 2 weekends and help you apply machine learning to your data set. Once I had done that, I then pitched the idea to Pengyu, who's a computer science professor at Brandeis, and we got a small grant together, and we applied machine learning to the data set that I have. And honestly, that can be turned into a business, because the machine learning predicts a person's performance in a spaceflight analog condition. Okay, so I got some cool results, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to go and present this at a NASA conference because ultimately my funding comes from NASA. And the organizer said to me, you can present your regular data, but we also would like you to participate in this fun side panel, which is about science fiction and how science fiction can inspire science fact. And I was like, huh, how am I ever going to do this? How am I going to bring a fictional world, an artistic world, into science research? So I started thinking about it. And at that time, I was also part of the Festival of Arts, and I got a small grant. And I did this whole thing where I went to different scientists at Brandeis, grad students mostly, but also some professors, and they gave me their data. And that's what's behind me. And I put this up in Schlossberg, and I collaborated with these three awesome individuals, and we 3D printed my data. And I was like, wow, I mean, like, this is definitely possible. So I start thinking deeper, like, what creative things can I use to do science fiction into science fact? And around that time, in my mythological universe, which I can't talk about too much right now because it'll take time, but basically I was creating a tale. And just to sort of like frame it, this is actually going to lead to a Spark grant. So I just want you to think about how crazy or interesting this is. So at the time, I had a yucca plant in my front yard. It sadly passed away. It was like 20 years old. Like it was there for me since I arrived at this house. So it was very sad, you know, and I lamented its loss. It was like a friend. And so I thought, what should I do? You know, like I can't just throw its leaves away. And then I found out that Native Americans use the fibers from the leaves to weave it together to create like a rope. So this is one strand. I created a whole rope, and that rope then became like an umbilical cord that connected me to Mother Earth, but it also became a way for me to explore philosophical ideas. And what I was exploring at that time is what is the relationship for our identity between animality and humanity. So this was sort of what I was thinking about in my mythological universe. But then I used that at the NASA conference. So these are two slides from a larger presentation I gave. It was supposed to be a little bit silly, but basically what I proposed is we outfit astronauts with this mechanical tail. And the mechanical tail can assist in postural stability, which is going to be a huge thing because when astronauts first go to the moon or Mars, there'll be a huge amount of instability. Even when they return back to Earth, actually, they're very unstable. And there's work from my lab that really supports a lot of this. And then, this tail would have a lot of sensors on it. It would have deep learning capabilities. It would be prehensile. And so parts of this was silly. People really liked it. But the questions I asked at the end were really serious, which was like, how many different sensory information can we map on in a novel way onto the body? Or, how long does it take for human and machine to merge? As I began to ask these questions in the conference, I began to think, is it possible that this could actually be the next direction of my research? And this is the first time I'm having this thought, thanks to my mythological universe. So I went to the NASA community and I'm like, hey, do you know anyone that works on spatial disorientation and human augmentation? And they said, yes, there's this person that works on vibrotactile feedback. So I went to Alabama, Fort Rutgers, where there is his name is Angus, he's pretty cool, and he's a scientist, an Army scientist, who works on spatial disorientation for helicopter pilots. And basically, he got, and this is actually entrepreneurship, in order to fund his work, he got an SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grant. And his idea for $1 million is basically to create this vest with all these small vibrators on it. And you put it on a helicopter pilot, and when the helicopter pilot gets really confused about which way they're tilted or which way they're drifting, those vibrators will go off on your skin, informing you which way you're tilting or which way you're moving. And so this was a really cool, interesting idea. But when I got back, I was a little bit bummed because I don't have $1 million and I don't know how to do any technology development. So how am I going to approach it? And now, okay, this is where it gets like crazy. This is where I could not have expected it, okay? This idea came from mythological universe, but the prototype came because we don't have an engineering school here at Brandeis. So the prototype came, believe it or not, from educational outreach. A lot of people told me that educational outreach is a waste of time. It distracts my mind from research. But it turns out that educational outreach actually led to my research advancing. So as I told you, I had this 7-year program, the Waltham High School Summer Research Program. One of those years was funded by Spark. Thanks for that. And then one of those years also for a different project, undergrad got a Davis grant, and there was some intersection. So in any case, as I was doing this outreach after the NASA conference, I joined the I-Corps group, which is really cool. And my team wanted to do educational outreach, but they also wanted to bring cutting edge science into classrooms such that the students are actually doing research that no one has ever done before. Like they're doing research that hasn't been published on. They're adding on to the bed of knowledge. So that was going to be, and you know, human augmentation is still emerging. So this is actually very possible with that field. So this was my team, Learn Through Technology, and it was really cool. And we developed this idea, and thanks to the funding from I-Corps, we allocated that to buying sensors, which were relatively inexpensive. And these 3 high school students who came through my summer program actually developed a working prototype. Now, not research grade, not a whole vest. They made a little choker. It had 8 vibrators in it, but proof of concept that this could be made. And it was thanks to Tim and Alberto and Jacob. And I met Jacob actually through this. And then later on, Jacob and I collaborated on a bunch of stuff. Okay, so from the I-Corps, I actually get a prototype that now convinces me that I can make a research grade one if I want. And I'm going to make it this summer once Brandeis opens up. Okay, so this then led to the next stage. So every summer I do something with my mythological universe. And I was like, now I'm thinking about human augmentation. Maybe I should start thinking about how to incorporate all of this and ask the deeper questions of, of life. So then what I did is the following. I held an event, and I'm almost done for those of you that are like, when is this going to end? These are all the people that came to my human augmentation party. And the first part was just normal. It was just lectures. So people talked about human augmentation through VR and AR, through drones, through BCI, through brain stimulation, through AI, but also through yoga, through chemical augmentation and mindfulness, and the idea that maybe we've been cyborgs from the very beginning. The second part was more focused on brainstorming, socializing, experiencing some artwork to digest some of the themes that are spoken about. And what was really cool is Jacob over here developed a sensory substitution device, and Anne here is wearing a blindfold so she can't see. She's holding a vibrator in one hand, and then she has a distance sensor here that tells her how far away things are. And then we played a game of tag. But again, this can be turned into a business, okay? This could be turned into a business for different types of detection, alert systems, or aids to help blind people. And there are variants of this, but there's a huge open space there because it's still very much in its early phase. The way I made it into my mythological universe is I gave birth then, this is my mom helping me give birth, to a mannequin, and the top half of the mannequin represents humanity, the bottom half represents technology, and then we try to balance it with the underlying philosophical idea being that where is the human identity and how are we going to balance these two things as we go forward? Okay, so I did this ceremony, and again, you might be like, okay, this is a crazy ceremony, who cares? There's no way a spark grant will come out of this, but you know, the spark grant does come out of this. And you might be like, how? Well, first of all, because of this event and because of getting to know Jacob a lot better, we created the Human Augmentation Initiative group, and we still meet every Thursday through Zoom. Jacob teaches us how to use Arduinos and connect sensors to it, and I sort of go all over how do you then use that to research human augmentation. So if you're interested, you can message me. It's open to everyone, and you're welcome to join. But also from this party that I held, oh wait, before I even go there. So also from this party then, and from the interaction with Jacob, I went and I took the summer program, and in collaboration with Marissa Maddox, who's an amazing teacher at Waltham High School, we created a course that actually is embedded in the school at Waltham High School during the school day, and kids get academic credit from Waltham High School. And it's a research-based course where they learn how to read scientific literature and propose ideas that have never been proposed before and then implemented. And one of the things was on human augmentation. So, okay, so concluding, you know, the human augmentation and the prototype, these two things led to the Spark Grant because Shen came to this party. And Shen is a recent PhD grad of neuroscience from Brandeis. And his idea was to basically take EMG, which are the electric signals that you can detect from your muscles that they're contracting, and you can then use that to create some sort of fitness device. And so I said, this is really cool. I'll help out with that because I know things about skilled motor learning. And then from there, I can also use it for my research because I'm interested in giving direct vibrotactile feedback as you record EMG for learning how to walk, for example, in a rotating room, which is an artificial gravity simulator. And I see a comment that just came up, but let me just make sure. Maybe it's saying I'm running out of time. Can you share the link for more info on Spark? Okay, cool. And Hannah shared it. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, cool. So we got the Spark grant, and let's see. I think I'm almost over now. And so July 11th of this year, if the virus subsides, I'm going to do a rebirth ceremony. You're all invited. It's open to the community. Just let me know if you're interested. And all of this is going to inform the next era of my research, which is human augmentation. Okay, cool. So I have finished. Feel free to reach out. I'm very collaborative, so you can email me, check out my website, LinkedIn, YouTube, stuff like that. I'll stop the screen share and Hannah can lead us to the next section.
So for the second part, we're going to open it up to all of you guys to ask questions to Vivek, or maybe share some insight that you learned from his presentation. So if you would like to speak, you can just go to the participants tab at the bottom and raise your hand, and I'll call on you. Or open your, okay, Esther.
It's really cool to hear the process.
Your sound is breaking up a little. Do you want to maybe type the question in the chat window?
Yeah, I'll do that.
In the meantime, does anyone else have any questions? Want to share any interesting insights that they got from this presentation? No one has any thoughts on the birthing? Oh, Rebecca?
Hi, great talk, Vivek. I've known you for a long time.
Yeah, thank you.
Never hear the same story twice from you.
Yeah.
Really learned a lot about you and your journey. And I think it's really important to point out some of the struggles that you had early on with motivation. Now that kids are home and they're having to go to school from home, I think some of those things that you had to overcome in terms of how to create internal motivation would be really important to share with students in, middle school, high school. Do you see an opportunity for you to maybe comment on how to create motivation during these times, or maybe a way that you can support even the Waltham High School with some of your insights?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the Waltham High School kids and two of the Lexington High students are in the Thursday meetings that I do with Jacob. And that could be one way, because they're project-based. You have community, so we have like small homework assignments. So you try to complete that, and then you come and you do things. I'm always happy to also talk to any high school, middle school students and create like mini projects with them. I think oftentimes it's just like a matter of opening up opportunities. So for example, if with Brandeis's or OTL's official name, you're like, look, we're going to do these projects, and you're going to have a mentor such as Hannah or someone else, or one of you guys, then I bet a bunch of high school students would definitely like would join for that.
So Esther typed her question into the chat window. She said, I like the idea of creating a universe. How do you overcome setbacks or challenges and not allowing them to get in the way of the process of being inspired?
I think it's really difficult because I'm also a very sensitive guy. So when people like say negative things or like inject venom, and there are a lot of people, and there's some people who like to on purpose inject venom into your dreams, and then there are others that are just like kind of oblivious, and they just do it just like that, and they don't realize how easily they can just destroy your motivation. I think for me, it's really multi-layered. So like anything that I'm trying to do would be motivated from different standpoints. So for example, like for human augmentation, it manifested through educational outreach, but I've got a lot of like setbacks there because a lot of people have been like, oh, you know, this is getting in the way, or you're taking too much time from these grad students or whatever. And so then I've had to brainstorm other ways to do it. And when my educational heart sort of sinks, or my research heart, because research can be very brutal because there are a series of absolute failures that inevitably come, then I try to switch into another gear. And so in that way, my mythological universe, since it's only mine, right? Like it's no one else's, that motivates me. That's the structure that pushed me into human augmentation, even though like it was kind of hard to do. And I keep doing ridiculous things in my mythological universe, and that sort of sustains me. Developing the mythological universe is not like how do you do it? And so that's like a slow process in itself, but it basically is just content creation and then congealing that content into like a thematic expression. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Great answer. Zuhair had a question.
No, I didn't actually have a question. I just like wanted to say that I think Vivek's story was like really inspirational, and like a lot of the times I also like get to like run out of motivation, and I just think that there are a lot of opportunities out there, so we just like need to keep on looking for them. And also one of the ideas that Vivek shared with us about like making a rough plan of our whole life was like very, very cool. I never thought of it, but I think having a plan really helps to get a lot of work done and keep us on the right track. So just like thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. And as always, you know, feel free to connect. And I'm always open to doing like multidisciplinary brainstorming. I mean, I always find that to be like a great source. So if you have a desire but don't know where to start, just contact, and I can open up an event, and then we can all brainstorm and create something epic.
Thank you. Epic.
Incremental steps to epicness for sure.
Amanda had something to share.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the part of the talks where like you really showed that there was a mix of like, the humanities and hard sciences in your path and in your story, and that they supported each other. I wanted to ask, do you think it's crucial to tackle your dreams from many different field perspectives, and how does someone do that when they only have experience in maybe like one field, like humanities?
Yeah, you know, it's like, it's a great question. I think different people have different ways of doing stuff. So for some people, being singularly focused in one field is sometimes good. However, like a lot of the funding agencies, even with science, are really looking at like multidisciplinary ideas. And in a way to survive in the funding environment with science, you do want to be able to create that. So the question becomes, how do you do it? What I found is that when I'm very focused with trying to create a collaboration, it usually doesn't inherently come. What I actually find is that when you make the human contact where you're just like, hey, I really like what you do, and I just want to chill and talk to you, and you make that human connection, and they believe that you're, and rightfully so, that you're a genuine person that's interested in what they want, what their dreams are, and what they are doing. And then you have like a wide net of this. Then eventually when an idea comes, you can begin to like gather people together. And I think that's been like my most successful thing. Like in order for me to do the Waltham High School Brandeis Summer Research Program, that was very difficult because grad students are wicked stressed. They have a lot to do. And the only way that I could get them to do it for free, where there was no, they weren't getting any official credit or anything, was because I was essentially, for lack of better words, marketing my personality, like who I am. And because they had that trust in me that I really cared about them and will be there for them, they were there for me to support this. I think I'll conclude by saying though that like what really makes things fun is the multidisciplinary approach. And so once you create these content with people or connections, as you begin to learn what their what they're saying, you can start brainstorming and spitting out ideas. I guess the final thing I should also say is that like failure is inevitable. Like you will go through, I must go through like 100, 200 people easily before like one or two resident people really work well with me, and then we start creating stuff. It really is like a long process, I think.
That was excellent insight. Bojanka, did you have a question?
I did. Vivek, I really liked when you had that slide of the small step that kind of convinced your consciousness that you're able to do this. And I think that a lot of people on this call are looking for that small step, kind of where do you start? Maybe you want to do something this summer. Some people have already started working on something. Others are still looking to get connected to someone or get inspired. And you are one of the most creative people I know. So any concrete tips on what someone could do today or tomorrow, some kind of small steps that can just get someone started who really doesn't have any experience yet?
Yeah, you know, honestly, for me, like the key was content development. Even if you don't have like a lot of content, if you create a blueprint or structure of what you want to do, sometimes that's enough. If you create like a post or an image or something like that, even a Facebook post, and collect those things together, that becomes part of your portfolio. So as I started creating my website, which became a living portfolio, it helped me two ways. Number one, I could just show people like, look, here's what I want to do with clothing art, or here's what I want to do with this. And that really accelerated whether I would vibe with someone and whether we would create something. But actually, I think the person that checks my website the most is just me, because once I start collecting all of my content there, it became a resource for me to remember, like, what exactly do I want to do? My working memory is really small. So if I try to just think it and that's it, I get frustrated really, really easily. But if I write down, look, here's everything I've done, and here are the small steps of how I can start creating these small content, I think that'll help. And for anyone that like wants help with that, and again, I'm not a master by any means, but I'm always happy to like talk one-on-one with you, and I can help you brainstorm like, okay, here are your dreams, and here are maybe the small steps that you could take to approach them.
Christina?
Yeah, I really find what you just said was just so much fun and so fascinating. Question is, how do you find motivation? I mean, obviously, you know, you wrote your dissertation. When you're involved in a really long project that has, you know, it's a year-long project, and it's hard to find natural points where there's like a micro accomplishment. And the thing is, I'm finishing up writing a book, and it's been a challenge, and of course every chapter is kind of an accomplishment, but it really doesn't mean anything till you're done with the whole thing. And so how do you find that sort of marathon inspiration, which again, a startup is often also a marathon, and sometimes there's no way around it. So how do you find inspiration when the micro accomplishments are just really micro, and you're really still in that marathon?
Yeah, it's difficult. You know, the PhD took 6 years, and for sure there were moments of such lost desperation where I was like, oh my God, because like, you know, with the PhD, it's not like 6 years is up, time's up, you graduate. I mean, it's like when you finish, you finish. Some people linger longer, and it's just, so it can be a very difficult place. I mean, and again, like I'm not sure if I have the wisdom to answer. I mean, a book is like an amazing endeavor. What I do is like, for all of my research, I just broke it up into other creative chunks. So for example, you know, I start making clothing art that represented some of the things that I did. The Festival of the Arts event that I did, the reason I did that was because like I wanted to showcase my research, but like, who am I going to show it to? It's going to take another 5 years for me to finish it. So I took the data and I made it beautiful into this 3D printed tower, and also into this big image that I had in the back. And then I got to talk to people, and it was in Schlossberg, so it was all musicians. And I got to talk to people about it. And then I was actually collaborating with a musician to songify the data, where you take, you know, because like balancing is about going back and forth around a point. Music is sort of about going back and forth around a point. So we collaborated on that. And so I think these small collaborations, so it could be like you take a chapter of your book and you find some idea that you've developed in that chapter without revealing what that chapter is, but then you re-express it through another artistic endeavor, or you host a little party at your house, along that theme. And then you're enriching your daily life with this larger structure that's spanning like multiple years. That's the way I do it. It has drawbacks too, because once you spread yourself too thin, you can get some anxiety attacks of like, oh my God, where's all my time going?
But no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for liking
Yeah,
it, I
it's a
guess.
great idea.
Didem, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's Didam. No, I'm not specifically question, but this was very interesting talk for me. It was very nice. Thank you very much. Very inspiring. I am in this similar process, and I probably need your help, Vivek. That's why I'm going to try to reach out to you.
Oh, definitely.
I am probably a little bit, older end. I'm a pure statistician, so I'm a very hardcore math background and 2 masters on that, and I am working on, all health-related sciences and publications and stuff. And I came to a point that I don't have any social sciences background. And I felt that rather than going for a PhD right now, which I can do it, but it's gonna cost me time. I'm in for knowledge. So I can learn anytime I want to. So thankfully I have the motivation. So, but I want to do some work for affecting for everybody, And I think that if I need to put some social sciences perspective, because I don't have that. I'm purely science and arts major. I love arts too. I have lots of ideas that you write it down. So my problem is like, where am I gonna focus on? Like I have ideas that I can do scientific contribution in physics because I'm very good at physics too, even though my science is statistics. So, but like I have so many ideas. So how you were able to put them in one thing focus on. So that's my problem. Like I have a bunch of ideas.
Well, the Google Doc I created was really expansive. I mean, it was 360. It was everything that I could possibly think of. And I could never do it even in a lifetime. And I think for me, it was sort of like, as you begin to like add your time and effort, some things will lead to fruition and others, you realize that it's going to take a lot of effort. And so it's always like a crazy balancing act. And so I start trying to figure out like what themes really do lead to growth. So I'm not sure that really, I mean, even in neuroscience, though, in early development, your brain sends neurons all over the place. And then there's this pruning process where it actually destroys some of your neurons and begins to like settle down. And I think creativity is like that too, where you let it grow and then you start like cutting back. Yeah, maybe if we do a one-on-one talk, I'll be more useful because I think I could digest more. If I see your ideas and stuff like that, and I could definitely connect you to people in the social sciences because like I've got friends, for example, in the anthropology department who do really cool stuff. And for sure, like someone with the mindset of a statistician, I mean, that would help them immensely.
I would love to collaborate. I will.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So definitely email me, and then I'll be happy.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Vivek, is there any concluding thoughts that you would like to share?
No, I mean, thanks to you, Hannah, for bringing me on the journey of preparing my presentation, and thanks to everyone at OTL for setting it up. It was really good for me to just think about like what my journey has been. I actually didn't realize how intertwined everything was until I mapped it out, which has been really cool. And then yeah, my final parting thought is like definitely anyone that wants to keep contact. I'm still at Brandeis, and I like doing multidisciplinary stuff, and I've got multiple interests. So anything that you're interested in, I probably am interested in and have something that I'm doing. So yeah, cool.
Do you mind if I share your email with the group?
Go ahead, definitely.
So thanks again for sharing your thoughts, and thank you to all of you guys for participating. Hopefully all of you guys took away something helpful. So our speaker for next week is going to be Jay Freeman, and he is an expert on product development. So see you all next week.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.